Hello, hello, hello. Welcome everyone for another episode of Angular Air. My name is Alyssa Nichol, and today with me on our panel, I have Justin Schwarzenberger. It's good to see you. How are you?
Doing good. How about you?
Oh, very, very well. Ready for the fun hot weekend. It's like been 101, 102 here, so it's been pretty spicy. I actually need to do a real quick 101 Fahrenheit. What's your best guess? What's your best guess?
Well, Minko's gonna get it, I think.
Oh, do you know Minko? No, 38.3.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Welcome, Minko Gechev is our guest for today. Oh, there's so many people already in the chat saying hello. Minko, for those of you who don't know, is an integral part of the Angular team at Google, and he is also one of the kindest, most compassionate people you'll ever meet. Mm-hmm. So I'm just so excited to have you here with us, Minko. How are you doing?
Thank you for the kind words, Alyssa. Doing well. Yeah, thank you.
Hey, everybody. Aw, chat's so excited to have you. I am honestly really pumped. You told me we had you on I'm going to say 6 weeks ago, and maybe that's just a total shot in the dark, but it was about the future of Angular. And you told us when we got offline, you were like, we didn't even touch half the things I wanted to talk about. And you said there's like a deeper look. So we planned this for after NGConf so that all the anything that the team was holding back would already be announced, and we might have more room to talk about things. But I am super excited to take a deeper look at the future of Angular. So
sounds good. Yeah, I think last time we mostly focused on signals, I believe, right?
We did. Yes, that was.
Yeah, we didn't even touch on server-side rendering. And at NGCon, we shared a couple of interesting things there around the new control flow and the defer blog that allows you to lazily load in a very declarative way parts of your template and all the transitive dependencies. So yeah, maybe we can dig a little bit deeper in there.
Yes. And I can pull up the RFCs unless you have something. Do you have anything you want to screen share?
No.
Okay.
We can also go through what we're planning to release in version 17 this November. And
because I got questions about 17. Actually, I got one hanging question. It was from someone who came up to me after my talk at KCDC last week. And they were like, but how do I do signals with my reactive forms? And I was like, I was at the progress booth and I looked over at Mike Hardington and he was at the Ionic booth and I was like, help. And he came over and I was like, I'm pretty sure v17 is going to handle that with something called model. And I was like, oh, thank God. But maybe it's not. Maybe you have more news around that and other things coming out in 17. So where are we going to start? What are we?
Well, we can start with Signal just to discuss where signals are heading in version 17 and what we're expecting to graduate from developer preview, what is coming in developer preview. And after that, we can maybe talk a little about template syntax. I don't think there is that much so that we can spend too much time on control flow, but we can just touch on it and discuss what were the reasons for us to introduce this new idea for control flow, for which we're collecting feedback now. And maybe we can continue talking from there about defer, maybe about the tooling that we're going to receive, release in version 17. We're planning to have ES built in stable, which is pretty exciting. And we're working on some other improvements in our compilation pipeline that may enable faster builds in development for sure. And standalone, we can touch on standalone for sure too. So yeah, we have quite a few things.
What I got a request. What about the route guards as functions? Can we talk about that too?
We can talk about that too. Yeah, we actually scheduled.
Yeah. Was that a personal request?
No. I saw it online. Everybody's asking it. They said, Justin, ask that question. Okay. It might have been personal.
Yeah, I would love to talk about it. There has been a lot of conversations about functional router guards recently, so we can always talk about them. And we're currently collecting feedback from the community about how they feel about it.
Cool.
Good to see you, chat. I'm just saying hi to everybody. Hello, it's good to see your faces.
Hello. Yeah, that's
So-
what we're going to talk about in
Oh yeah, this one, the toggle for the standalone flag.
Yeah.
What is this request? Because he wants it inverse, like the default.
Yeah, currently standalone, the default is false. And if you want to create a standalone application or use the standalone schematics with ng-new, you're going to get it set to true by default. But if you're creating a new Angular application, you're not getting this experience. And we need to do some work to update the documentation just to make sure that the current default learning journey reflects what we ship in the Angular CLI. So that's going to be one of the things that we'll be looking at in version 17 as well. Like one of the reasons the DevRel team developed this new tutorial with the housing, which is our new getting started journey. It's not only to we're introducing concept gradually there, which hasn't been necessarily the case in the past. Sometimes we just throw folks in the deep water with RxJS and ng modules, and it could be a little overwhelming. So now we're taking it a little bit slower, and also it was ng module free or optional ng modules from the start.
Okay.
So now we will have to just refactor this tutorial a little bit, prepare the documentation, and make sure that the switch is not going to break anyone. So that's one of the things that we're planning for version 17.
No, that totally makes sense that you wouldn't be able to just do it and move on. Like everything needs to reflect that.
Yeah.
Someone said, and control flow template to remove common module dependency. Oh, I wonder if that's not related. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, well, control flow, that's actually, that's one of the benefits of the new control flow. It's just embedded into the templating language, which kind of simplifies the syntax overall. Like I honestly have never been able to effectively use ngls. I have been using ngf, and I have been using another ngf with the opposite condition to emulate ngls. Pretty excited about this new control flow. We'll be able to have better type checking as well with proper type narrowing. And there might be some other surprises there. Like if you look at the JavaScript benchmarks, there is a really popular JavaScript benchmark, series of benchmarks online. You can check this out, JS framework benchmarks, I think, where they're just taking a table and swapping rows or removing, adding rows. Angular is doing really well there for almost all the benchmarks except one, swapping rows. Because we haven't really optimized for it. We don't consider this to be the most realistic scenario that everyone will be just swapping rows constantly in their application. But at the same time, Angular is misperforming because of that. It's not performing as good as it can.
When you talk about swapping roles, you're just talking about user roles where you're like, this is an admin user, this is a default user.
Oh, by roles, I meant in the benchmarks, there are roles in the table that we're just swapping.
Okay,
and yeah,
I gotcha. Okay.
Angular is doing pretty well on everything besides this one. And the new control flow would also enable us to update the diffing algorithm that we use under the hood so that we do well in this benchmark as well. So there are performance implications, better type checking, and better developer experience, easier to remember how you're actually going to use this control flow.
Do you think it's going to also provide, I guess, some safety for developers to not get into situations where, like the classic example, like using a function in template and change detection, hitting it all the time, things like that, or the fact that when we do our ng4s and we have the function to, I'm blanking on the name. I don't know why.
Track by function, or?
Yeah, track by. Thank you. It's been a long week. The track by, right, and things like that. Are we going to get some more of that kind of under the hood for us? Do you think that'll come with it, or are we still going to kind of have to pay attention to detail and make sure we're kind of orchestrating everything to maximize that performance?
Yeah, the track by piece, it hasn't been very intuitive as well. We have been having to look up syntax very often as well. So it's going to be more intuitive with the new control flow for sure. I'm not sure where exactly the control flow will be able to guard us from not invoking functions in the template. I think this is still pretty much a possibility. If someone wants to invoke a function, they can. Maybe signals, they can in 4 is just binding to signals value primarily, so that the template can receive an update from the signal when the signal has received a new value, and we can update the particular part of the template. I guess this would be something where we can get something to guard us with some static checks.
And maybe some of the tooling that's, like the Angular tooling in the browser and things like that, maybe it'll start surfacing where you could just hit it and it'll tell you right away, oh, you did something and now, the rows are not performing like you wanted to or whatever. And so go check that out and help surface it that way. Cool.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, so we touched a little bit about control flow. Do you want us to go back to the beginning and discuss signals and what is going out in version 17 and what is coming up next?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so in version 16, we released a signals library, which is pretty minimal. It has like a couple of primitives, computed, effect, and signal. And it has been in developer preview. Even though its API is pretty stable and it's pretty kind of simple, it doesn't have too big of an API surface. We still wanted to make sure that we can experiment with it in case we need to adjust it as we are evolving the Angular's integration with the signals library as well. And in version 17, we're expecting to make it graduated from developer preview, so people can
all of it.
The signals library.
Well, there's just so many. When I look at like all of the RFCs and all the chunking, I'm like, we get all of it.
Not yet.
Okay.
Part of it.
So and just the first. Okay.
Yeah. So we're gonna get, let's say, 20%, maybe 15% of it out of developer preview, and we're gonna get another 65%, let's say, in developer preview.
Okay.
And the rest is gonna come after. But what is coming up in version 17, what we're expecting to ship, like what we're hoping, there might be some blockers and we may have to delay it. But as of right now, we're thinking about signal-based components. So this is one of the RFCs that we shared. And in signal-based components, we're going to have inputs, which are actually signals, and you'll be able to, if you want to, lift these signals to observable so that you can have observable inputs. So this has been one of the most demanded features in Angular overall, and happy that we will finally have it available. It's going to be in developer preview at first.
Just showing, because there are so many. Let me actually back up in a tab. So look, there's so many RFCs. It's so exciting to me. I don't know. Some people find it daunting, but I just get excited. But yes, you said that the signal-based components is the one that we should look for. Is there another one that we should look for in 17, or just everything in that?
This is one of them.
Oh, okay. There's more.
Actually, that's kind of the main one. Okay. And there are different features here. Like, for example, zoneless. Currently, we don't really have path toward zoneless, but we're hoping in version 17 to have developer preview of this functionality. So if you want to start building components with signals without Zone.js at all from the start, you'll be able to do that, even though it's going to be in developer preview and we may evolve it and change the API without
If you start building components without Zone.js and you're like, obviously I have existing components that have it, is it gaining you anything, or do you need to get to a state where everything is zoneless in order to see the gains for getting rid of those checks?
Yeah, you'll be still getting gains for the application, for the part of the application that you have moved to signals.
Okay.
And especially let's say you have a front page, you have a landing page, which you want to be really fast. Like when the user opens it, you want to be instantaneous. Maybe you don't want to be using Zone.js for this one once we have an option out of it, so that you can have better metrics for Core Web Vital, better results for Core Web Vital metrics, such as interaction to next paint, let's say, where Angular's change detection could be blocking you from performing optimally.
I love that. And I love being thoughtful about where you start to bring in these new features, because that makes so much sense, right? Especially I just did a user testing live on stage, and you're like get to watch like users as they go through your flow, and there are certain parts that are really, really important. And so I love that. That was such like it's a no-brainer, but I'm like, oh yeah, no duh. Like start smartly with where you bring in things like standalone.
Yeah. What did you do user testing, Kev?
Oh, so my friend Catherine, we were at KCDC and I did an Angular Renaissance talk, but then right after that, she was like, hey, I'm doing a usability testing talk. And so she actually had me come up and be one of the people that like tested a site live for her that I'd never seen before. And apparently I broke all the things. So that's always fun. That's always fun. She was like, oh, I didn't anticipate you using your keyboard this whole time. And I was like, I'm sorry. Isn't that the point of this? But no, I honestly would highly recommend it. Like for because her whole talk was about developers everywhere. So if you're making any kind of app, you do have the power to do even the simplest of user testing, and it can really help you even with things like this, where it's like, I see so many people who are like, there's so much new in Angular. It's so overwhelming. Where should I start? What should I use? And I love that, like what Minko just said about obviously time to first paint on your homepage, on your landing page, on your dashboard is super important and super valuable. So why don't you start there, right? Like, and improve that metric. So, because I feel like we do as humans tend to take the fire hydrant and like full to the face, where you're like, what am I supposed to do with all of this? So I love that. That was good, Minko.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Also, like for us on the team, and also for GDs, there might be an opportunity to guide developers on direction. So yeah, that's a good point.
So
crazy how time just passes so fast. Like you think about it, we're so far into the life cycle of Angular, right? For so many years now. And so all these applications are out there. So you really have this challenge of saying, hey, how do you add these features and allow people to kind of drip in changes, right?
Yeah.
And but if I kind of sit here and think about it, I feel like the new version of Angular is just what just recently happened, right? I can't believe all this time has gone by and all these applications are in market and all those things. And it's just, it's a factor that you have to think about. You know?
Yeah. I was looking at some stickers. We had stickers from the initial release of Angular 2, I guess, in Mountain View 2016. I just arrived in the States. That was just a month after I arrived. And I went to this event. It was pretty exciting to see that. I guess one good thing is that this version of Angular that we had back then, it's very much still relevant. So if someone wants to learn Angular 2 from 2016, they will be just as productive with Angular version 16 or in the future 17. So that's something that makes me happy.
No, absolutely.
And when you mentioned user testing, we did something similar. We wanted to make sure that want to make sure that signals are an ergonomic API that people can easily manage their component level state with it, and they can build different apps with it. So we did a different series of user testing in a similar way. And honestly, what people struggled the most with was control flow.
Yeah,
people struggle with NG4 and with NGF, specifically non-Angular developers.
I see that all the time. I mean, I hear that complaint often, and I always dismissed it because as a reason to not use Angular. And I'm like, you're insane. It's one small syntax piece. Like,
yeah,
but it is so much more, especially when you're more accustomed to these other frameworks. So that's interesting though, that can't, because you said you were testing signals and control flow came up.
Yeah, we asked people to build a to-do application, I think. So they had to iterate over all the to-do items, and NG4 was so unintuitive that people were just getting stuck there. And we have been discussing control flow for a while now, also because there is certain integration that is necessary so that you can have even better developer experience with signals. So we have been talking about it, and we haven't been sure in what direction we should necessarily take it. And this was a pretty valuable input.
That's awesome. So you said that with 17, we'll see things like signal-based components out of preview. Is there things coming into preview that are not there yet?
Signal-based components, they're going to be in preview. The signals library is going to be out of preview. Yeah.
Okay.
So the signal-based component, they'll be different just because the compiler will be also producing different output for them. So currently, when you compile a component, you get your template in a function. And when you have views, when you have, let's say, an ngIf, we're going to take the block of the ngIf and extract it in another function. So so we're just going to have different functions. And the functions, honestly, they're pretty easy to read. If you open the compiled by the Angular compiler code, you're going to see that you have just a template function, and everything there is pretty intuitive. You have a block for when the component gets rendered for the first time, and you have a block for when you run change detection. And inside the block for change detection, let's say you have just where you have interpolation, you're going to see interpolation function call, which is the instruction that we're using for interpolation, creation of elements, update of styles, all that stuff. And what we're going to do in version 17 is just making sure that we're connecting the state of your components with the place in the template where it is used. So, like when you have a signal and you wrap the signal within an effect, the effect is going to be called every time when the signal changes. That's very, very similar to how change detection is going to work. We're just going to wrap these parts, these functions that are representing your template in effects, in something like effects. And when the signals within these effects change, we're just going to invoke change detection for these parts of your template. So it's very similar. It's like a pretty simple primitive, and the way that everyone is going to use it, that's the way that Angular internally is going to use it as well.
Does that count as change detection?
Yeah, we're still going to perform change detection, but rather than on top of the entire component tree, we're going to perform it only in certain parts of the template.
Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting how change detection, how reactivity kind of works. There are two main aspects there. One of them is when are we going to trigger the change propagation? For example, in React, that's going to be with set state. For instance, with Angular, without signals, it's going to be whenever Zone.js tells us to. And with signals, it's going to be whenever we set states and respectively schedule change detection. So that's part of it, when we're going to trigger an update. And the second part of it is how we're going to perform this update. Like React does the reconciliation. They compare the virtual DOM trees and they apply the difference. For Angular, we're directly going to the view and directly detecting changes in the bindings. And as we find the change, we update the corresponding part of the view. So it's pretty fast already. We have been just doing it over a larger part of your application that we had to.
I guess if it doesn't go through every DOM node, in my mind, I wasn't categorizing it as change detection, because I'm like, it's not being like, who needs this? Who needs this? Like, it knows who needs it, but I guess it still counts as.
Well, people call it like sometimes they're checking because we're checking the individual bindings this time rather than all the bindings in the app. We're checking individual bindings in a part of your template.
Not at you, but at Addition Addict, who Justin answered. They're like NG4, and then I forget. And he said, I always remember Game of Thrones. And I was like, what is he talking about? And then he said, let Game of Thrones. And I was like, oh my God. So it wasn't you. It was funny. Totally Justin. That's
I always forget, like, is it in or for? And so I finally was like, okay, Game of Thrones. So every NG4 is a Game of Thrones. And then I remember it's the let for or let of, sorry.
That's a really good one.
It is. That's a really good one.
I haven't forgot since. I was excited. I saw that question. I'm like, yes, I got an answer.
Khaled asked earlier, can schematics automatically convert component inputs to signal inputs?
No, yeah. So there are a lot of things that we can automatically migrate, and signals is not one of them. And also, we don't want to enforce everyone to be using signals from the start. They can experiment with the performance critical parts of their app where signals make sense. So you'll be able to just update one component to be signal only, and the rest of your components could be relying on Zone.js for triggering change detection, and the interoperability story is going to be pretty clean. So that's going to be our recommendation. And also, when we release signals, like, this doesn't mean your applications are going to get obsolete or anything. They'll be just fine. Just if signals make sense for parts of your application, just move them to signals. But everything else is going to continue working the way it is today. Very similar to standalone components. Just, you don't have to move your whole application to standalone. Yeah. Even though we currently build migration. So that's the difference between standalone and signals.
I think that also goes back to the question I asked about helping protect us as developers a little more, that like this partitioning under the hood of that template and saying, okay, it's going to know how to only change detect this chunk. That's an example of how that's going to help us, right? Where maybe we, if we focus in our template and said, this is where I'm doing the loop over this stuff and I'm not doing anything over here, or whatever I do over here, it's not going to be affected by this data set changing. So it sounds like we're going to get that for us, which is cool.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, if you will not be paying the cost for an updating part of the template, you don't have to re-execute the entire template. Yeah. So signals will guard you in that sense for sure.
That's cool.
Yeah. And do you want us to dig into server-side rendering, or should we spend a little more time?
Oh my gosh, yes. Because I kind of upset my husband about this, because I told him, I said, you would not believe what's coming. Angular's so cool. I said, listen about this. And I was like, server-side rendering. And he was just so grumpy. And he was like, back in my day, that's the only way you did web applications. And I was like, whoa, opinion much? So apparently this isn't news to everyone. Just doing everything on the server for web. I was like, this is so exciting. But yes, tell us the news around server-side rendering, Angular, where we're going.
It's funny. When I started, we used to do everything on the server as well.
Are you grumpy though that we moved away from that? Because some people are grumpy, and I don't know why.
Well, they're just cycles. I see like we are going almost full circle at all. Yeah. Like especially with a lot of technologies are very similar to what we used to have, but slightly different. Like let's say turbolinks in Ruby, they're very similar to let's say React server components right now, but slightly different because the rendering mechanism is slightly different, and we're getting slightly different instructions on the client so that we can re-render only what has changed. And also there are very similar elements with PHP. And I mean, I like to say that like everything has been invented in the 17th, and we have been just reinventing it since then. And I'm not saying that like React did that, like everyone.
I interviewed a dev who actually described it beautifully, because I was like, it's like a pendulum, and we're going back and forth on certain features. And he goes, no, it's a spiral, because we're building on the things that we've learned, and we're constantly raising ourselves and the web higher. And I was like, that was beautiful.
Yeah, it's a journey of refinement, right? And when you do refinement, it's essentially what you're doing. You're just like, let me try again, iterate again, and yeah. What a good description. Good metaphor.
Oh.
We can put the golden ratio somewhere.
I guess we no longer need on-push strategy.
For signal-based components, it will not be necessary, which is great simplification, honestly. Like I gave a talk at NGConf 2018, I believe, or no, Angular Connect 2017. And up to this point, I wrote a book about Angular, and I kind of knew Angular pretty well. But at this talk, for the first time, I realized that on-push change detection is also going to be executed when an event in the component happens. So I've been doing like Angular, like reading Angular source code and like writing about Angular, and like wrote a book, and I still didn't know about this thing. And there are many other subtleties in on-push which I may not even know right now. Like, even though I have been working on Angular for 5 years. So it's a complicated change detection strategy. And I'll say it simplifies the model significantly, that we will not have it in the future. We will not have the need for it in the future for signal-based components.
Stefan asked, what about signal operators? Is that planned? So far, my signal-based code is far more imperative, especially the effects compared to RxJS.
Yeah, no, like that's an interesting thing that I saw also at NGConf. Often people think about signals as a replacement of RxJS, And they're pretty different things. RxJS is fantastic for management of like processing of synchronous streams of data. And the streams actually not necessarily data. They could be streams. I mean, it's still data under the hood, but could be stream of like user interactions. That's great. Or a stream of data from a WebSocket, or could be the stream of your state throughout the life cycle of your application. And you need these operators there for sure, so that you can map or filter the individual kind of data that is coming throughout the stream. And Signal is more of a way to just one value over time, which kind of sometimes sounds similar to Signal, just because you can update the value over time and you can still process it in a similar way. And that's why we enable you to lift signals to RxJS to observables, because it makes sense in certain cases. But in general, it just, the idea of signals is just to have like a value that we get notifications for when you update it. And that's it. So there are not going to be any more operators. That's the signals API. We just have signal, compute it, and effects.
I kind of diverted us, and I apologize. And Khaled is like getting me back on track. Can you please ask Minko about what's coming to SSR and TTFB improvements in specific? So did we have any more that you wanted to say? Because I don't think we really delved into SSR too much. I think
No, we didn't. Yeah, we can go talk about it. So one of the exciting things that happened recently is we can run Angular applications in an edge worker. And not only like a simple edge worker. So edge, like we have a CDN network, right? Like that's where we deliver usually our static assets. And recently cloud providers such as Cloudflare, they have been trying to also add some computation to happen on the edge. So for example, you can run some JavaScript at the edge. Good example, like a couple of good examples are, let's say you want to concatenate some JavaScript so that you don't get a waterfall of requests, like one JavaScript requesting another. You can just do a concatenation of these two scripts at the edge, and you can return that to the client. But like you can do some fancier things. People have been trying to do server-side rendering at the edge for a while now. And it provides a JavaScript runtime that is more limited than Node.js, but you can still do a lot of things in there. So Angular now is compatible with the Cloudflare's JavaScript edge runtime. And they enable, and we can render server-side render applications at the edge, which improves times to first byte, because you're rendering the application in the closest geographical location to the user possible, where there is like compute available. But something else that Cloudflare does, which is also compatible with Angular, is smart placement. So imagine you do server-side rendering, but during SSR, you send a bunch of requests, like you make a bunch of queries to a database. And this database, unfortunately, it can't be at the edge as well. Because like we can't, like, I mean, theoretically it can be, but you know, it's not going to be very consistent. Like the data needs to be synchronized across all the edges, and it becomes tricky. So your database would be, let's say, in Europe, and you're rendering the application on the West Coast. In this case, like doing 100 database queries might be pretty costly if the database is in Europe. So Cloudflare will find the best location for your Angular application so that it can minimize the latency for the database queries and also optimize for the latency for the end user. So the smart placement is available also in Angular and with Cloudflare deployments, and you can actually learn more about it in the ngconf keynote that is now online.
That's awesome.
So this is one of the optimizations for time to first byte.
So I'd imagine with all the other pieces, when we talk about the standalone components and ways to lazy load things and things like that, you know, I know we have some stuff already, but it's probably just going to get more and more of this ability also to start thinking about delivering chunks of your UI through that. Yeah. Right. And server-side render chunks of it. So now maybe my app loads and then I'm pulling, you know, different components that were server-side rendered. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is going to lead to optimization in many core web vital metrics, largest contentful pane for sure. It's going to lead to like interaction to first pane improvements. And what else do we have there? First input delay. it's time to first byte. It's mostly around latency there, because you want to deliver the first byte of the application as quickly as possible. So if you lazy load time to first byte, it's not going to be too relevant. Honestly, frameworks can do a little bit to support you there, but it's mostly your infrastructure. With all the improvements that you mentioned, we're going to for sure improve significantly larger contentful paint, which is, I would say, often the metric that we're like developers are like striving to improve, since infrastructure sometimes can slow us down, but often, most frequently, what slows us down is shipping a lot of JavaScript. There are a lot of articles by Chrome about the cost of JavaScript, and it is still what makes the applications the slowest. So with defer, we'll be able to declaratively annotate parts of our component tree. We'll figure out what we need to lazily load, and the compiler internally, I mean, not the compiler, I guess a bundler. The compiler is going to produce just dynamic imports under the hood, and from there, the bundler will be able to extract this chunk of your template and all the transitive dependencies. So if you're using services or pipes or wherever, it will extract them into a separate chunk. And on the client, you'll be able to lazily load them in a declarative way. I keep saying declarative, but you don't need to write much JavaScript there. You can just say that you want the loading of this particular part of your UI to happen, let's say when it becomes visible in the viewport, which is pretty powerful. Like, we're going to have an intersection observer there that is going to be tracking the user's interaction, and when this piece of the DOM becomes visible, we're going to trigger loading, or we're going to trigger prefetching. And we're working also with the Chrome team to make sure that we're using the best way to prefetch resources, because there are so many ways right now. So yeah, that's something that I'm really excited about, and we can evolve it a lot from here, because we can start thinking about how does it look when we combine it with server-side rendering. Should we render anything on the server that is marked as deferred, or we should skip it? And if we load it, if we render it, how we're going to hydrate it? Is it going to be some kind of like an eager hydration, or is it going to be some kind of like a partial hydration, progressive hydration? So it gets really interesting from here.
Stefan was asking how fast Angular will be in the future when there's zoneless applications and a lot of deferred loaded blocks. Is there a metric to other frameworks possible?
I mean, it very much depends on application per application. I can share the movies app right now that Michael Hlatke, an Angular GD, built, and I mean, it is doing really well. It's like it's 100 out of 100 in Lighthouse, and it is outperforming many other implementations. So it very much depends on how developers build apps. For sure, there is certain, like what Quick has been talking about, how the framework can support you to build fast applications from the beginning. There is truth in that for sure, because if the framework is optimized for this asynchronous loading, it puts way less work on the developer, because you don't have to think really about these lazy loaded boundaries at all. On the other side, we don't know if that's the best developer experience, so we keep evaluating, like going back and forth and trying to figure out what is the optimal path forward. So yeah, that's
one of the things I look at when I see kind of all these features and all these things that get excited about, right, and want to implement, and even when we talk about these things like performance and stuff, and how are people going to navigate when they have these large apps that they already have in production shipped, and how are they going to get there, right? And I think the thing that kind of stands out to me is the key. I think the key there is to get on a cadence of keeping your Angular version for your applications updated as often as possible, because I think that's the thing that's going to unlock the opportunity to then iterate over consuming all this neat new functionality, right? And I've seen it recently in like the past several versions, 14, 15, 16, that you're kind of like, you're still on 14, you're missing out on some of these things, right? And so for me, my recommendation for teams would be like prioritize getting up to the latest version of Angular, and nailing a cadence of being able to stay on top of that. And if you do, then you're going to have the opportunity to iterate and jump on all these things and start bringing them into your applications and whatnot.
Yeah, another good point. And the caffeine just started getting me, so I'm getting already excited. What you mentioned with the keeping up to date with the latest versions of Angular is super important. And that's why we're trying to keep all the pre-existing APIs available so that we don't slow you down in keeping up to date with Angular. Like if we want to make router guards functional, let's say, we're going to provide an automated migration so that you're not stuck migrating all of your router guards to be functional. If we want to move forward and enable path with signals, we're not going to deprecate Zone.js and make all applications invalid and like make you migrate your entire application. We're going to enable it as a parallel like path. And you can incrementally move some of parts of your application that makes sense to be zoneless or makes sense to be using the defer block. You shouldn't be using the defer block probably everywhere.
Really? No?
Yeah. But yeah, if you have like a performance critical page and like, I don't know, you have like a footer somewhere that has like a chat box and a bunch of other things, you probably want to defer this.
I want to defer all the things.
So I know. I was going to say, I don't know, Minko. I'm probably going to overuse it. It's fine.
Probably going to be okay.
Some questions. Will there be a feature lockout when not moving to signals? I think you kind of touched on this, but.
I see. You mean if you don't move to signals, would you be just stuck with like subset of the features that we'll be offering in the future? Like, are there going to be like signal only features? Is that the case? The question?
Yeah, or features that like at least depend on your app using them partially or something. I feel like it always heads that way, but maybe not. I can't see a future in which it wouldn't.
Yeah, there are some things that are interesting. We have 15 more minutes, so we can chat about it. Let's say we have different parts of your application with the deferred block. We have an application on the left, like something on the left, let's say a navigation bar, and something on the right, I don't know, something else.
An article.
What is it?
An article.
An article on the right.
Article or something.
And an action that you're performing on the left updates the state on the right.
Yep.
So you're both loading these in a different way. And let's say we decide that the deferred block will be server-side rendered. So you get the left side server-side rendered and the right side server-side rendered. And you start interacting with the left side. So we download the JavaScript associated with it and we hydrate it. And when you start interacting with it, you update the state that is used on the right side of the application. So how do we know that we need to hydrate and download this code? There is no way for us to know unless you're using a signal, though, because signals lets us know where we are using these particular values and would give us a notification that we'll have to download the code with the right associated with the right part of your application and hydrate it. So there are some features that might be signal dependent just because there is no other way with the current Angular to make them happen. So I see them currently mostly related to performance or signal-based inputs. That's another one. If you want to have observable inputs, then you'd probably have to be using signal components. So there might be some features. Obviously, like we'll be trying hard to, if something is possible without signals, we'll try to implement it in the alternative path as well.
Just going back through questions to try to make sure I didn't miss anybody. There was one about, can you give spoilers for the forms module, reactive forms module? I'm expecting a big refactor with things like standalone and signals.
We don't have any concrete plans yet. It's not going to be part of the version 17 release. We're going to start focusing on this in version 18. So that's going to be part of the 2024 planning for sure.
What frameworks are currently inspiring the Angular team?
Yeah, that's another really good question. Like all of them, yeah, and not only frameworks but also languages. Rust. We have been reading about. There are so. Let me show you my paper just a second.
Yes.
Taking notes.
So there are a lot of things here. Like a lot of.
Did you print out paper? Did you print this?
Yeah.
What is happening? Did you print out a web page, Minko?
I printed out a bunch of web pages, and that's like some of the papers that I have been reading. But like we have Pavel and Alex who are really focused on reactivity, and they have been exploring reactivity in a variety of different contexts. They have been reading some of these papers. At a certain point, we realized that we're kind of paper buddies. We have the same interest in the same papers, which was great. But we are also looking at other JavaScript technologies, like obviously Svelte, even though the syntax is borrowed from, I don't know, handlebars for the control flow. Svelte is using it, and they're pretty successful with it. Signals, that's a great abstraction that Ryan Carniato made really popular in the JavaScript world. So we're inspired by Solid. I honestly love Solid.
Yeah.
I had a chat with Ryan on Tuesday, and yeah, we have been just sharing our perspectives about the JavaScript ecosystem. React has been doing some cool things. I'll say React might not be the biggest inspiration for us just because we have very different rendering models and very different kind of mindsets for how things should be done. But yeah, we have been, obviously we're talking to the Vue teams. I mean, we have been talking to the Vue team. We had Evan New give a talk for the Angular team a couple of months ago about Vite. So we have been getting some inspiration for our build system from there. And Sarah was part of the Vue team. So we're getting inspiration from there too. Also from the, yeah, I'll talk about that. Also for the, what was I going to talk about? Yeah, we have been also looking at some other not popular ideas. For example, there is a language called Pixie Dust, which is a UI framework as well that is developed by a Googler who has very similar change detection as ours. It's very similar to Svelte as well, but he built a brand new language so that he can make the change detection even more like static with static dependency tracking. A lot of ideas there and a lot of inspiration from all around. And yeah, on Svelte, on Vite in the Angular CLI, so there is an effort in kind of there is an exploration to make sure to see so that we can see whether we can compile individual Angular components independently from the rest of the application, and this way to do that without changing the semantics of the code. So if we can do that in development, because in production is going to be a significant overhead and it's going to reduce runtime performance. If we can do that in development, we might be able to use Vite entirely for the build system. So there is an exploration going on. There is like it's not a trivial amount of work. So we're going to keep people posted in case we make progress there. And also we're in touch with the Vite team. We're collaborating. So if something like we're going to have support from their side as well. Luckily.
Nice.
Hey, I got a question. A little different topic question.
Let's do it.
What about web components and some support around that? Like if I'm wanting to really build out a presentational layer that my Angular application uses, that's all built in web components, so I can use it elsewhere, and then just use Angular to tie that together and orchestrate. Is there any kind of new story around that going forward? And
yeah, this is not part of our top priorities right now. I'm not saying that it's not going to be working. Angular elements are going to just, they'll be getting some improvements throughout the process of like improving standalone components. And you'll be able to build easier Angular elements by using signals rather than having to deal with zone collisions. But there are some other problems there, which I also, honestly, I don't know if could be easily solved. For example, how you make your bundle size small without like compiling, like just dynamically putting web components together using different parts of Angular. We don't really have a way to optimize the bundle size.
What about in terms of consuming those web components in our Angular components? Maybe support around the templating and understanding that Angular says, oh, I know that this is an element that I can be using, right?
You like the schema, for example, having
yeah, like the schema and stuff. Like, is there any type of improvements there or anything that coming down the path that like can kind of be an easier? I just found it kind of a challenging story to say I'm ready to make web components. I want to use them in my Angular components in my application, but working with trying to figure out the ergonomics of that and the development process, like how easy can it be for that?
Yeah, Chow's backing you up. He said web components, custom elements was going to be my question for the Angular team at ngconf, but I didn't get the chance.
Yeah, that's so. We don't have anything on the roadmap right now specifically focused on web components. It didn't pop up in our developer survey as well, and it has been. There are opportunities for improvement there. Like we haven't combined with the other work that we're doing, it has been hard to give it higher priority compared to improving the reactivity model and server-side rendering. Yeah,
maybe some of the start is in like the build tools and maybe the template, parsing and things like that to start figuring out some solutions there that help with those ergonomics of, okay, it's real easy now to use web components in your Angular templates and see it light up and get, those sort of things. And as a first step sort of thing.
Yeah. I see how there is an opportunity to have it like a better schema right now for so that you get like a better type checking. I mean, another thing that we're really focused on top of these big efforts around performance and developer experience is also the developer ergonomics improvements. So Jeremy talked about how many thumbs up. Jeremy and I talked about how many thumbs up worth of feature requests we closed for version 16, which is like 4 Olympic pools, right?
Wow.
Of thumbs up, 2,500. If the custom element schema is something that pops up in these top feature requests, we're definitely going to look into that. So I think there might be some, as you mentioned, some low-hanging fruit about like individual feature requests that would improve the overall developer ergonomics story.
All right, interwebs, you heard it. We've got to vote that thing up. Get our voice out there. Custom schema.
All right, we are almost at the top of the hour. Is there anything else, Minko, that we didn't mention about the deep future of Angular that you wanted to talk about today?
It's not. We could get like even deeper into the future of Angular. We didn't touch much on altering format, for example. We're having an exploration, and next year we'll be doing research in that space to see what will be an ergonomic way to build applications. But our plan is pretty vague at the moment. We're very much not even in exploration state yet. We just have different ideas and different thoughts.
I just imagined you all like on the side of a mountain with like hot cocoa and like, is this how it goes down? Like, yeah. And then you're like all bringing your vast amounts of sticky notes to the table, and you're all like, is that not how it happens, Minko? No. When you talk about brainstorming these things, I immediately put you on a mountainside. I don't know why. You're like, absolutely not. It's indoors only.
It's usually in a conference room, like way less poetic.
Okay.
Well,
I'll contact your people. We'll make something happen for your next one.
Sounds good. Well, going back, like we had some discussions on like on a boat in Seattle or Angel Island here in San Francisco. I was not part of this one, so there was like a hill, not a mountain.
The Angular hill, not a mountain. I love it. Oh, I'm reading through chat. Justin, do you see anything else? Any other things we want to highlight? Any other comments? Chat, you were amazing today, on fire.
Yeah.
Thank you for the support.
Very much.
Bringing your questions and comments. Oh. I think we've got 2 minutes to the top of the hour, so I think we're going to do picks and wrap and have a sponsor video. So Minko, Justin, do you guys have any picks? Anything outside or inside of tech that piqued your interest this week that people should know about? Anything legitimate and cool?
Justin,
You're
you want
bo-
to go
I'm
first?
kidding.
I'll go first.
Okay, yeah.
We the question I asked earlier in the beginning, which we didn't have time for, which is cool. We'll just plan more talk time at some point. But around like the
what was your
whole
question?
I'm getting to it.
Oh, sorry.
The route guards and functional route guards over class-based route guards, and the fact that like now we have the inject function, right? And so we can kind of orchestrate functional route guards a little bit easier with that. And there's been some fun stuff I've been doing around that. So I would just encourage people, like, check it out, like start thinking about making these functional route guards and play with it.
Okay. I was trying to come up with something else. Like I have two, one tech related and one not tech related.
What are they?
My tech related one is analog.js. Yeah, Brandon has been doing some great work there. So I want to recommend to people to give analog.js, the current Angular meta framework, a try. And I've been thinking about what else. I think just like we all deal with a lot of stress on a day-to-day basis, and sometimes we don't really notice because we're so focused on the work that we're doing, and this could impact us in very negative ways. So just bringing higher like self-awareness throughout the day, and just even breathing exercises, that's something that I have been finding incredibly and increasingly more and more valuable. There is a very simple practice, coherent breathing, that is I learned about last week. And you just take like 5 seconds to breathe in and 5 seconds to breathe out, and that's it. And it definitely leads to some changes.
I'm like pulling up an article on that because I haven't heard of it. So I'm gonna like look into this.
Yeah, me neither. I've been interested in such stuff for a while, since I started doing karate, I guess, when I was 8, and never heard of this. So it's cool.
Brandon said "a" in the chat, so I thought you should know. Oh, I am going to a double feature tonight with my little baby is having his first sleepover with the grandparents. So that's my pick is date night for the win. I'm excited. I don't know. It could end in tears. I don't. Gee.
Wait, are you going to share what you're going to go see?
Oh, Flash and Indiana Jones.
Oh, nice.
And I did get my cycling in earlier, so if you're all judging me for how much sitting will be done, like I do move. Sometimes, occasionally. Aw, thank you, chat. You are all so amazing. Thank you for tuning in and for sharing your comments and questions. And thank you so much, Minko, for taking your time to be with Justin and I today. It was a really good session, and I appreciate you.
It's a pleasure. Yeah, thank you everyone for joining, and thank you for hosting us.
Awesome. All right, we're going to hear a word from our sponsors. That's a wrap. We'll see you all on the next one.
See ya.
Angular Air is sponsored by Kendo UI for Angular. We have over 100 components built from the ground up in Angular, or each framework and library that it's built for. So not only do we have Angular on the JavaScript side, but we have Kendo UI for React, jQuery, and Vue as well. And if you're on the .NET side of life, we have things for Blazor, Maui, WPF, and so much more. All of our libraries are themable, customizable, and of course come with killer professional support. So try it out for free today at kendoui.com.